Yeah, it's a nice setup.
Space here.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It's giving me the go ahead. Hello and welcome back to Wethersfield Talk. My name is Rick Gary and I will be your host for this evening's program. We are filming tonight's program September 13th, and we are about a month and a half away from, close enough, I think I got the date wrong, a month and a half away from the election on November 8th. So we are doing some political interviews. We just recently interviewed State Rep Amy Morambello from the 28th District, and that's available on our channel or on YouTube. So tonight we are interviewing the Republican challenger for the 28th District, Brianna Timbro. Brianna, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No problem, Brianna. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
We're happy to give you this opportunity to introduce yourself to the community. So to do that, why don't we start, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, who you are. People don't know you, obviously. You're a newcomer.
I am. I'm
so let us
brand new.
know who Brianna is.
Okay. So I've been in Connecticut my whole life, so Connecticut native. Me and my husband actually grew up in Middletown, and we moved to Wethersfield about 7 years ago. So we like to say that we chose Wethersfield. It's where we put our roots down. We had 3 kids. I have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2.5-year-old, almost 3. So I guess a little bit more than 2.5. But yeah, so a little bit about me. I guess I was an educator for a little bit. I have a secondary teaching degree for social studies. I taught U.S. history and civics. Got my master's in education, kind of thought I'd go down that route, but then I had my family put that on hold and ended up getting into real estate part-time. So I've had a really unique vantage point from education to real estate, and now I'm here.
Now you're here. So you are running as a Republican candidate for the 28th District.
Yes, I am.
Your first foray into politics?
Yes. Yes,
so
first time.
Typically when someone gets involved in politics, there's usually something that sparks their interest, something that makes them say, I got to get involved.
Right.
Did you have that moment?
I can't
or a few moments.
Yeah, it's not like a specific moment here, but definitely over the course of a couple years. So I've always been really interested in politics, just having the social studies background, history. I taught civics and U.S. history, so a little, I would say, more understanding than maybe the basic person, just about the Constitution, how bills become laws, all of that, and I taught it. So I fell in love with it. I've always stayed really up to date with what's going on. And honestly, I think since I'm, well, not to, whatever, I'm 32.
That's okay. You didn't have to say that. I didn't force that out of you.
Yeah, no, you didn't. But since I have, just been an adult, been a working adult, having a family, I think I've paid a lot more attention to the things that are happening in the state. Affordability, crime, 2 very important things. And then really the last couple years with COVID and everything that's kind of happened and transpired with that, I started getting involved in the local elections, just helping with door knocking. It was then that I realized that I didn't really feel that legislators, most current legislators at the Capitol were authentically representing the community that they're supposed to be representing. And that's why I'm here.
That's it in a nutshell.
That's it, yeah.
Okay. So are there any specific examples of things that you feel the legislators are either not doing or doing incorrectly that you feel should be done differently?
Yes. So there's a few, but just to kind of focus on, what I've mentioned in terms of affordability, over the last 10 years, we've had significant tax increases. Cumulatively, it's been almost $5 billion worth. Crime has increased significantly. I mean, I know just from being in Wethersfield 7 years ago to now, we never really had to think about, the amount of vehicle thefts, property thefts. I didn't move here and see the police telling us to make sure our doors are locked at 9 o'clock and all of that. And then really, I think as a parent, just the lack of ability to make decisions for my own family the last couple years kind of pushed me over the edge. So.
So on the crime issue, I know they just passed some crime legislation recently,
Yes.
trying to make it easier for agencies to work together. There's a few things. I don't remember all the details. Is there something specifically in the crime that you think we should be doing, either on the prosecution end, or is there something maybe you think specifically on the crime end?
Well, I think with crime, there's been this push to focus it on the pandemic, when in reality it's been increasing for a while.
Okay.
And that's because of failed policies. And, being an educator, I am 100% for, juveniles who commit crimes not being, not their life not being
Sure.
over. I think that it's
Right.
so important to support these programs that are out there that are utilized to help these kids or first-time offenders, just to make better decisions in the future and to be held
Right.
accountable. But it's been happening before the pandemic, and I think a large issue that we see, this huge increase, is really when the police accountability bill was enacted. So I'm not saying that all parts of the bill are wrong, but we have really kind of placed a stringent strain on our officers, especially when it comes to being able to be personally sued or liable for things
Right.
that happen.
Now, obviously, and I've talked to people about this before, we still want to make sure that the officers that go rogue,
Right.
because we do see that, and I'm not anti-police, I don't want anybody saying that, but like any profession, right, there are good and bad, and we have to be able to hold them accountable,
Absolutely.
right? So,
Yes, I totally agree.
right, because I will say one of the things is you lose confidence in the entire police force when one goes bad, which is unfortunate,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so that's, but anyway, I digress. So also you mentioned more rights, the rights of a parent.
Yes.
So what do you, more specifically, I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, so throughout, the pandemic, there were several mandates that were handed down about kids and how families choose to, or really they didn't really have a choice, but to mask them in school. The religious exemption was taken away in 2021, so even families that aren't super comfortable with specific vaccinations, they can no longer do that. They have to homeschool, which I think is, pretty unfair. So you're taking this government overreach, I think, to another level. And then on top of that, and believe me, I was, very strongly impacted by COVID. I lost a family member, so I'm not
Right.
by any means saying that this is,
That
something
it
to be
wasn't
taken
real.
lightly and
Right.
that it wasn't, real or anything like that. It was real. It is real. But the fact that the governor's emergency powers were extended, not once, not twice, but like 5 times, to me, really, as a resident, as a public, a
Right.
person who's in the public, it feels as if there's a lack of transparency there, and as if the legislators who are in favor for that were really just kind of like, hey, I'm going to just give everything back to the governor to make these, really these
Right.
decisions that the public, had a really hard time with.
Yeah, it was a very divisive time. There's no
Yes.
doubt about that.
Yeah.
A tough time. For the vaccines, so are you, because we mandate a lot of vaccines in school,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So was it just this specific, the way this was done, or all vaccines?
No, just
Okay.
so it's really the religious exemption.
Oh, okay.
It's
All right.
the
It was
fact
more that
that
focus on the
yeah, the
religious.
focus on the religious exemption. I think that as people, you should be able to make your own
Okay.
medical decisions, and the fact that one of our First Amendment rights, which is freedom of religion, that's been taken away. It's not a super popular thing. I think we're the 6th state to
Wow.
do that.
Okay.
So
Right.
I think that
All right.
really was
That was
unfortunate.
kind of yeah, okay. No, I just want to make sure everybody's clear on,
Yes, I am for vaccines.
yeah. No. And again,
in general.
I'm not here to judge either way.
Yeah.
Just to get that information out there. So, affordability, that's another thing you mentioned,
Yes.
right? So we did have we'll say one good thing that I saw, this property tax
Yes.
cap.
Mhm.
Because that's been an outrageous problem for a long time, the hike in property taxes.
Yes.
Where we got some benefit here in Wethersfield, but the cities were getting killed,
Right.
So what other issues with accountability do you think, how can the state legislature help to bring that affordability into Connecticut?
So I think there's a few different things that can happen for immediate relief. You know, what we're seeing right now with this increase in inflation and just,
Yes.
I mean, I know for myself personally, you know, my grocery bill has nearly doubled just from inflation and living and expenses and all of that. And obviously, you know, that's not the state's fault.
Right.
But for immediate relief, you know, reducing the income tax,
Okay.
getting rid of the truck tax so that our goods aren't, you know, don't
Costing more,
skyrocket
yes.
any more than they should are two immediate things that could happen. And I think that that would be a welcome thing for a majority of
Sure.
residents in the state.
Okay. Excellent. So we've touched on crime and affordability and the healthcare or the health initiatives during COVID. Are there other issues that kind of stick out to you?
So honestly, so we kind of touched about it in the
Yes.
beginning where you said, you know, like, why are you running? And
Sure.
I just want to touch more on the authentic representation.
Okay. Yeah, you did mention that early. I was going to
yeah.
ask about that. Yeah.
So, you know, I think that, and we've said several times too, you know, the
Yeah.
word divisive.
Right.
I think that what we have lacking at the Capitol right now in the government really is that legislators are, or I hate to use like a, you know,
blanket
umbrella
term, sure.
term. A lot of legislators are really focused on staying with their party. And I think that there is a pressure from the top down to stick to your party, and if you don't, that on both ends, you know,
Yes.
you're like forsaking your party because you're not voting with them.
Right.
And in general, I think we have an issue with career politics. We have a issue with people who come into politics maybe with the right intention in the beginning,
Right.
but you know, they get caught up in the pressures and maybe lose sight of why they originally went in wanting to make a difference.
Right.
And at the end of the day, the reason why we have the representation that we do is to represent the people.
Right.
And I think that people should always be over politics.
Okay.
And you know, I'm a huge fan of term limits, but ultimately, I just think that there needs to be more people at the Capitol so we don't have such divisive party lines happening.
Okay.
We are able to actually get to a place where, hey, I'm a person and you're a
Yeah.
person, and let's come up with a solution that
Okay.
makes sense, because there are multiple sides and there's not just your way or my way.
Right,
But I
right.
think it gets lost in what's happening right now.
Would you support term limits on a state level or no?
100%.
Okay.
I would support term limits. I actually just got endorsed by U.S. Term limits. I think
Okay.
it's a huge issue, and I think a lot of things would be rectified if you know, that was in place.
Now, you have been officially endorsed by the Republican Party?
I have.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. There was no primary.
No.
Okay,
No
all right.
primary.
All right. Yeah, so, you know, obviously I think a lot of people support term limits,
Yes.
but unfortunately, people also don't want the term limits in for their legislator, right?
Right.
Right? So I want term limits, but Mitch McConnell's been doing a great job for 45 years. I don't want him out.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a tough thing to sell.
I think it's a tough thing to sell, but I feel like where we're at right now as a nation, and then
Right.
especially just coming down to the state level, you know, if we're really looking for any type of change to happen, then at the end of the day, you know, we shouldn't have people in the same seat for 40 plus years,
Oh.
because 40 years ago,
Yeah.
no matter who you like, you know,
Right.
how you think that they're doing, we're in a vastly different world with different things
Right.
that are in the forefront, different issues that we're dealing with, and I think you need to continuously have those, you know, fresh ideas and
Right.
new people coming through that are energized and ready to get involved and be willing to have conversations, because they're
Right.
not so, you know,
know.
stuck in
Right.
what they were doing.
I agree with the term limits. It's a tough sell because, you know, all politics are local.
Right.
And a lot of people are swayed by what is that politician bringing to me and to my town, right? And one of the things that I've always had an issue with is the bond fund, where, you know, cities like Wethersfield and everyone, the senators go, they get money for the town, but they're borrowing the money,
Right.
right? So is that something you feel should be altered a little bit? Because it's one of those things that I feel, you know, everybody wants their pork projects for their town, but should the state be paying 20 years?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, that's something I would have to dive a little
Yes,
bit more
sure.
into, to be completely
Right.
honest.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there's anything that's really established that is without the means to be able to be improved.
Right.
I think, again, kind of going back to what's best for the people, what's best for the town, practices,
Yes.
processes are meant to be improved upon and looked at. So I would be
Right.
open to anything that, you know,
Helps
would involve
out.
that. Yeah.
So the only thing, we talked about affordability, we talked about taxes. This year, the state had a large surplus.
Yes.
4 billion, I think it was, or whatever it was. A lot of that went to pay off the unfunded pension.
Right.
Right? So do you think when a state has a surplus like that, that we should be all, like, immediately lowering taxes? Because some people believe that means you're taxing too much.
Right.
Is that something you also feel, or?
Yeah, so I think that we have, you know, a combined reason for the surplus. Part of it, I do believe, is because Connecticut has, you know, one of the highest, you know, taxing situations going on. But, you know, also with the COVID relief, we do have a surplus with that too. But yeah, I do think that if we're getting taxed, then that money should have the ability to come back, especially when we're in the times that we are with the inflation,
Right.
you know, and everything else.
So with inflation's a tough one. People always want the government to do something,
Right,
right? Which is not that easy.
right.
But you mentioned some immediate tax relief type situations.
Yes.
So you're for that in this situation. What, as temporary relief?
Well, I think a permanent relief could be reducing the income tax.
Okay.
You know, I believe from 5 to 4%.
Okay.
And with the what's it called, the gas tax.
The gas tax.
I think that is happening until December, but
Right.
we could include diesel with that, which
Okay.
would also alleviate. And then I just don't think that the truck tax is necessary.
Okay. Do you, in general, you don't think it's necessary?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
not
okay.
right now. Anyways,
Not right
I
now.
don't, right.
Okay.
I
All right.
mean, just looking at where we're
Right.
at as a state.
But as a state legislator, you think you would obviously, or from what I'm gathering, want to look at the whole tax structure because you think there's some issues
Yes.
with the way we tax in general,
Yes.
income
Yeah.
tax.
Well, yeah. I think there's issues with the way we tax in general, and it seems that there's always new taxes being introduced. You know, like
Yeah.
every year, it's consistent.
Okay. So.
And I think taxing is obviously there's parts of it that are totally necessary. I'm not
right.
against.
Yeah.
You know, we
yes.
need to be taxed.
Yes. Right.
But I think it's gone a little bit too
Okay.
far.
All right. And obviously with the property tax, the relief that Wethersfield saw wasn't a lot,
Right.
but it was some because we happen to have a very high mill rate in Wethersfield.
Yes.
41, I believe it is our mill rate. So we saw slight relief. Some towns saw none.
Right.
You know, but again, it's always not going to be equitable,
Right.
right? And that's a tough thing when you're in the legislature too, because some of the things you're going to vote on and do may help the state, but may not help your town, or may help your town and not the rest of the state,
Right.
right? And you have to be willing to
Yeah.
accept
for sure.
those things, right?
Yeah.
Now you came from Middletown, which was obviously a bigger city,
Yes. Yeah.
and so, but the issues, do you think are similar? Like, as you look at Wethersfield and in Middletown, and you're thinking about going to the state legislature, you have to think about, you know, I'm representing Wethersfield, but I'm also a state legislator.
Right. So I think first and foremost, because I've actually been thinking a lot about that as we're,
Yeah.
you know, kind of nearing here in November, is that I am elected to represent the 20th district.
Right.
And it just so happens that the 20th district is a decent portion of Wethersfield and only Wethersfield,
Right.
which differs from many other districts that
Right.
include, you know, 4 or 5 other towns within them.
Right.
So when it comes to representation and what's at the forefront is and will always be the 28th district.
Okay.
Now, obviously, within that, you have legislators that you want to work with and come up
Right.
with something that makes sense. And with Connecticut being so small, and so, well, it's small in size, but
Yes.
obviously we have a ton of people.
Sure.
There are, of course, diverse communities within, you know, 10,
Yes.
15 minutes of each other. So I think a well-balanced approach is the way to go, but you can do that, I believe, as a legislator and still keep, you know, your district at the forefront, but recognize that, yeah, you have to come together and
Right.
try and find a solution.
Right. Because that's always a tough thing, because the needs of Hartford, the needs of New Haven are so different
Right.
than the needs of Fairfield or Litchfield, and so to, you know,
Right. You want a well-rounded
Yes,
solution.
right. Have you been doing some outreach, meeting the community?
Oh yeah, so I've been doing a lot of door knocking.
Okay. All right.
So I am door knocking daily, just going and talking to people, really
Okay.
having these types of conversations.
Right.
You know, why I'm running, what I'm about. Also, I've done several meet and greets.
Okay.
I had a fundraiser at the beginning of the summer, and as we get close to November, I'm, you know, just going to be ramping up. I think it's a little different for me, right? Because this is kind of my
Right.
my introduction to this whole thing, and it's completely out of my realm of comfortability. And people are so passionate about politics, which I love. I
Yes.
think that's so important. So
Right.
there's a fine line between having these conversations and getting myself out there, and then also, you know, recognizing that, you know, I want to be authentic and not feel like I'm imposing,
Right.
you know, myself on
Sure.
people either.
What are some of the main things you've heard as you've been out there?
So really what we've talked about, I think in Wethersfield, the top thing that I have heard so far has been the crime.
Okay.
You know, especially families. And it's not, we're talking about surrounding towns
Sure.
too. So there's
Yeah.
several instances in the last, you know, 2 months of things
Right.
that are happening in broad daylight
Right.
that we never really kind of thought of before. So crime is definitely at the top. Affordability is at the top. And believe it or not, most people agree. I know you said it's a hard thing
Yeah.
to sell, but most people agree that, you know, the career politician thing,
Right.
they have like a bad taste in their mouth with,
Sure.
you know, what they're seeing.
Well, again, I hear that all the time, but the same politicians keep getting reelected.
Right.
So
Right,
people are
right.
talking about changing it, but they don't actually want to change it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a tough one. And
Well,
again,
it would require going out of your comfort zone a little
right,
bit, you know?
absolutely. Well, it's the devil you know versus, you know,
Right,
something
exactly.
new. And I don't mean that as someone is the devil out there.
Right.
The other thing is, I think in general, people are happy in Wethersfield with the education system and with our services generally,
Yeah.
right? A lot of the things you would be tackling, so obviously at the state level, you're not dealing with the Board of Education issues, at that
Right.
local. You are dealing more with the tax type issues and
Right.
the big ticket, the big picture stuff,
Right.
right? So you decided to go right for the state legislature as opposed to local.
Yeah, so honestly, I have always kind of been a go-getter personality.
Yeah, okay.
I grew up in more of an old school type of family,
Yeah.
and you know, my thought process or what I was taught was always like, hey, if there's an issue, if you are encountering adversity, then you can either complain about it or you can try and actually do something about it.
Right.
So you know, like I said, I have I think a more versed understanding than a lot of people just from teaching.
Right.
You know, this subject, and I wasn't really kind of going for anything. There was just an opportunity that I
Okay.
saw, and it was, you know, why not? I think I would do a really great job.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah.
I fully support anyone who gets involved anywhere, obviously, because I think I've seen it locally, and I think also nationally, the volunteerism is way down.
Yes.
And I think a lot of it has to do with our ridiculously busy lifestyles that we have nowadays,
Right.
that nobody feels they have the time to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate anyone who does take the time to get involved because it's difficult.
Yes, it is, and it's not. You know, I'm very lucky to have an incredibly supportive family. Not just, you know, my husband, but like my parents, my in-laws, my
Sure.
sister. You know, they're all
Supporting each
very
other.
supportive, and,
Okay.
and I couldn't do it without them. So
Good.
yeah.
So we're getting close. So is there any other hot topic issues or anything you want to say before we're going to meet some of your biggest supporters in a minute. So is there anything you want to touch on before we finish up?
I feel like we really had a great conversation. Thank you so much again for having me. I guess if I was to leave off with anything, it would just be that I am open to be communicated with. My email is timbroforwethersfield@gmail.com, and also if you go to briannatimbro.com, you can sign up to be on my email list, and I'm on social media. I tell everyone that I come into contact with, I'm a normal person. I'm coming into this, you know, because I I think that change needs to happen, and I want to be that, authentic voice at the Capitol. But yeah, so feel free to reach out, talk to me. I'm in the community all the time. My kids play sports. So
You're
if you
always
see me,
around.
don't hesitate. I
right.
love to talk, so.
Excellent. So we do have some supporters, some of your biggest fans,
Yes,
who want to come out and give a shout out.
they do.
Yeah, so we'll bring them on now.
Hello,
Come on.
come on.
And they'll they can come back
How do I-
here. Come on
Wanna
right over
come
here.
up right in
Come
the
on.
front?
Yeah, come on over here.
Okay. Look, if they don't know what to do with themselves. This is
So why don't you
Gianna.
introduce us to your supporters here?
Yes, so this is Gianna. She is 5. She just turned 5. This is, you want to say her name? No. This is Elias, who doesn't want to say his name. He is 6. And then this is our littlest Roman, who is 2, but about to be 3 in a couple weeks. And of course,
I was going to say, you'd introduce the
and
biggest.
that's all. No, this is my husband Kevin, who is just amazing. I could not do this without him. So,
Okay.
yeah, this is.
Great, guys.
These are my people.
Thank you for coming out and supporting Mom. Nobody has, see, they're
Yep.
very quiet.
This is amazing. I'll stay here for the rest of the night, and we'll be good.
That's great. Well, Brianna, thank you for coming on and introducing yourself to Wethersfield.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you for watching another episode of Wethersfield Talk. Remember, the election is November 8th, so please get out and vote. No matter who you support or how you want to vote, just make sure you get out and vote. It's a right we should all participate in. And again, I want to thank you for watching Wethersfield Talk, and we will see you soon. Wave goodbye, everyone.
Bye.